Before we start today's episode, I have some exciting news. From April 7th to 11th, 2025, I will be hosting a free online virtual summit called No More Heroes. This is a gathering of men's work leaders from across North America, and we're going to be diving into myth, initiation, fatherhood, archetype, and the masculine psyche as a whole. Furthermore, we'll be looking at where we are in terms of men's work today and where we ought to be going to bring forward a brighter world. If this is interesting to you, good news. It's free and open to everybody. You can find a link to reserve your seat in the description below. Now on to the show. The Smiling Human podcast is made possible by listeners like you. If you would like to experience more of these shows into the future, then please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Hello, and welcome to The Smiling Human, where collectively we evolve through inquiry. Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Smiling Human podcast. My name is Oak, and this is another episode of Oak's Hour. The astute among the listeners will notice that this Oak's Hour comes after the first 4 episodes of Season 3, rather than the first 3, as was the case with the previous 2 seasons. This is because I wanted to have this episode air 1 week prior to my very first online summit. Now, you would have heard about it at the head of the show, but I'm going to take a few moments here to share in greater detail what's in store from April 7th to 11th. That's just 5 days away. This summit was made with the intention to bring active, heart-centered, and conscious leaders from within the men's work community across North America into a single space, such that we might together address the biggest hurdles for masculine maturation and men's work in the modern world. This summit spans 5 days and features 2 panel discussions, one on the opening and one on the closing days, over half a dozen signature talks, and several live podcast conversations, all of which are completely free to attend. To register, simply look to the first link in the video and episode descriptions. Day 1 of this summit focuses on myth and initiation. Day 2 on the warrior archetype. Day 3 on the lover. Day 4, the magician, and Day 5 culminates with the king. Our current roster of speakers, as of recording, features Alex King Harris of Evolved Well, former CEO of Yogi Tunes, men's mentor, and an all-around beautiful human being. Rico and Manu Vite of Mystic Masculinity and the Becoming Brothers podcast. Nick Palladino King, coach and co-host of Conscious Conversations with Nick and Nitin. Matthew Sturm, a thought leader, author, and men's coach. Tyson Adams of Thrive Life. Deus Fortier, co-creator of Awakening the Wild Erotic, which is a men's weekend retreat immersion, very powerful. Wesley Job of Resonance Breathwork and a beloved collaborator of mine. Justin Dale of Tribe Builder. Dolphin Casper, founder of Relational Intelligence, a coach and a communication wizard. Soma Miller, founder of The Essential Man. Michael Bates, the heart and mind behind the King's Code, and Markwell from Sacred Sons and Conscious Confrontation. I too will be offering thoughts and talks throughout the week. Now, many of these brothers have been on the show previously, and each has left a lasting impression on my heart. So, in light of the topics at hand, I'm tackling the following questions today. Question number 1. How is myth shaping our modern understanding of masculinity? 2. What is missing from modern man when it comes to initiation? How might an immersive and ritualized experience help to fill this gap? 3. How does the major quaternity of king, warrior, magician, and lover help men find balance in themselves and within their communities? And 4. Why might we choose to reimagine masculinity as a mythic, poetic journey rather than a fixed identity with predetermined sets of accompanying actions? What benefits might follow from this imagining? Lastly, the question that hangs powerfully in my heart: what kind of men does the world need today? So with our purpose and journey clarified, let's begin our show. How is myth shaping our modern understanding of masculinity? As far as I see it, we have two major categories of myth currently exerting influence on our conception and embodiment of masculinity: ancient myths and their modern substitutes. Although Joseph Campbell's work presents us with the notion of the monomyth, the singular mythic structure seen across all cultures, also known as the hero's journey, I believe that this previous distinction is a valuable one, as the influence that each category has on the conception and embodiment of masculinity is unique. Pertaining to our ancient myths, it must be said that even those in our society who are entirely unaware of their mythic ancestral heritage are still carrying with them pieces of these great stories. I will draw a through line as an example of how our ancient myths shape our conception and embodiment as modern men. Our Western culture is largely birthed out of a unique blend of Judeo-Christian and Enlightenment-era thinking. Both of these broad classifications of thought share at their core the fundamental premise of separation. For the Abrahamic mind, God is separate from creation and exists somewhere beyond the world as we know it. For the rational Enlightenment thinkers, generally speaking, the mind is distinct and separate as an entity from the body, and furthermore, man is distinct and separate from nature. This basic notion of the individual, a dualistic, rationalist, reductionist, and often materialist perspective, can be seen playing out to an extreme in what some have called the lone wolf syndrome of men. This is the crippling habit of men to self-isolate, to deny relationships and support in favor of bearing the burden of their suffering all on their own, as if the value they hold as men depends on their capacity to act out an idealized and exemplified version of this prime principle of individualism. Now, in regards to our modern mythos, its influence can be seen by simply walking down the street of any major city. But before I move too far into this explanation, it does bear expressing that much of modern masculine mythos has been eroding over the last half century, in part because of its inability to produce equitable relations between the two genders, and in part as a consequence of receiving meaningful backlash to this aforementioned deficiency. Now more than ever, the fragile narratives masquerading as myth that once offered crumbs to the hunger for myth alive in modern men are failing, and ever more rapidly. They're failing to orient men and boys towards connection and to authentic purpose and meaning. Okay, back to modern myth and its influence. It's hard to separate modern myth from ancient, as the ghosts of millennia's past have been handed down and combined with various paradigm shifts, such that they have left us staring with utter confusion at the being we see in the mirror. We hear from our media, such as movies, plays, and novels, all of which are the mediums of our modern myths, by the way, that a man is strong, unyielding, self-sacrificing, a hard worker, loyal to his family and his company, and capable of acquiring and providing. Our modern myths are fixated on the echoes of this individualism idol, and thus bring to the forefront the idea that every man for himself is the absolute best way to tackle any and all problems. While this perspective can promote powerful accountability, it still fails to mend the divorce of man and the rest of life on Earth. Our modern myth makes us masters, yet cogs, powerful, yet pawns. We are sold stories devoid of the substance necessary to truly connect us with what matters most. And as a result, we have notions of masculinity that are harmful for both men and women. We have boys and men acting out in ways that take them further from that which they hope to find, and at great cost. Our modern excuse for myth is the junk food of the mind and soul. Shiny wrappers attract only to leave our deepest yearnings untouched. One of these very real yearnings is for ritual, initiation, and community, which brings us to our next question. What is missing for modern men when it comes to initiation, and how might immersive, ritualized experiences help to fill this gap? Firstly, it will serve our purposes to get clear on what exactly initiation is, what it does, and into what men are to be initiated. Initiation is often associated with rites of passage. To be initiated is to pass from one state of being into another. The rite is the container, the space and the time wherein the initiation occurs. The initiate leaves this space-time fundamentally transformed. In most cases, they enter into their tribal community, having passed this rite of initiation, as an adult, a man, having left boyhood behind. We, in modern times, have no other process to accomplish this transformational end. Such rites can be ritualized and performed by members of our community, or produced by the circumstances of fate. Whatsoever the case may be, all will face the trials of initiation. If we do not seek them, they will be brought to us. This is precisely because initiation is absolutely necessary for the maturation of the human psyche. From birth, we are built expecting to pass certain thresholds and to be welcomed into and placed within a tapestry of community and of life. So what then is missing for modern men when it comes to initiation? Firstly, formal rites of passage. Secondly, the meaningful admission into a thriving and cohesive community. And thirdly, a clear understanding of how our current widespread malaise and crises of mental health are deeply linked to the loss of such rights within our current culture. I've spoken to these before in other episodes and highlighted just how our current rites of passage are utterly insufficient. Take these two examples: getting your driver's license or having your first sexual experience. Both are commonly seen as rites of passage for boys in the West. For each of these, there is a threshold that is passed, sure, but what community are they really being welcomed and placed into? People who can operate a motor vehicle? People who've had sex? There's far more to being an adult, to maturation and the fullness of human experience than just these two things. Such conceptions are impoverished at their very base, as they are blind to the communal relationality that characterizes adulthood, as well as all the responsibilities that come along with it. Thus, what's missing is something more real to our humanity, with all its complexities and fullness, something that genuinely transforms the initiate, the boy, through contact with aspects of himself and the world that would otherwise be inaccessible to him outside of that rite. And thus, in so doing, taking part of this rite, he is actively made into a different experience of man, a different experience that benefits him to be and benefits his community to have as a member. This community element is our bridge in addressing the second point. How might immersive ritualized experiences help to fill the gaps left by the loss of these rites of passage and initiation? Well, it helps to fill this gap by reinstating the social practices whose loss has left us in this dismayed and distorted situation. Ritualized and immersive. This describes rites of passage. These are not new. However, it behooves us, as a result of the extremity of our need, to reimagine rites, ritual, and initiation for the modern world. Those traditions that were capable of initiating a boy into the village are no longer completely adequate to prepare a man for this globalized technocratic society in which he finds himself. We need to renew such rituals, to weave them into our current psycho-cultural paradigm such that they succeed in equipping modern men and boys for the world full of vast absurdities and the responsibilities of his own that he'll find therein. I do see one hope for this renewal: the active reclaiming of timeless images and understandings that have followed us for so many different societal iterations. Such a reclamation leads us directly into the realm of archetype. The upcoming summit that I mentioned is formatted around what is known as the major quaternity of masculine archetypes, these being the king, the warrior, the magician, and the lover. This comes from a book co-authored by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. But how exactly are these archetypes able to connect us to meaningful initiation? And how can they help men find balance within themselves and within their communities? Well, all meaningful initiations need a clear starting point. They need a threshold to pass and a space into which one arrives. The archetypes of king, warrior, magician, and lover can provide just such clarity. These, like all archetypes, populate the personal and collective unconscious, as well as our mythic narratives. They have enough shape and structure to them, offered by their associated symbols and images, to be able to offer usable maps across the terrain of the psyche. As for starting points, each archetype within this quaternity has its reciprocal boy archetype, the immature or juvenile expression of the masculine traits. For the king, we have the divine child. For the warrior, the hero. For the magician, the precocious child. And for the lover, the Oedipal child. Each of these forms, when examined as such and in one's own personal life, offers a very clear departure point for any man wishing to undertake his own maturation. We can all find ourselves within some combination of these archetypes. The threshold for each can also be made clear, although the exact details of any man's initiation will be unique to him, unless that is, he is being taken through a specific and repeatable sacred rite. The threshold is often seen as a trial, a test of the boy psyche and an invitation to move beyond its previous limitations. The warrior's trial is well known and well documented. His courage, his strength, and valor will be tested. The magician's trial is one of skill, faith, principle, and mastery. The lover's trial can be one of loyalty, compassion, resilience, grief, and sacrifice. And the king faces all of these, as well as tests to his virtue, dedication, his temperance, and his wisdom. No matter how these trials look for you or for any man, there is a very real and very different world on the other side of them. It might actually be more true to say that there's a more real version of you on the other side. This real and new aspect is yet another reason that these archetypes are so useful, as this aspect serves as a target. And target provides aim, and with aim comes the ability to take strategic, intentional action towards growth. Thus, this aim, the more definite characteristics of these archetypes and their trials, all provide men with a workable structure to get from where they are to who they know they could be. And this is exactly how they support us in finding balance in ourselves and in our communities. Are these archetypal and initiatory structures dynamic? Absolutely. Are they overlapping and interpenetrating phenomena? Definitely. Are they made up and contrived? Surely not. Their veracity is a result of their origin as emergent and responsive qualities of consciousness over millennia. These archetypal structures are our ancestral heritage, a wellspring from which we might draw cleansing and healing waters in such times of great dismay and turmoil. When we come to understand these aspects of our humanness as being alive, dynamic, informative, and adaptive, we begin to take the first steps away from a fixed, rigid, and stagnant view of man and masculinity, and towards a view that sees masculine life as an unfolding. We can reimagine our own masculinity as a journey. But what benefits follow from reimagining mature masculinity as such a journey? The greatest benefit I see from incorporating the dynamic nature of this work is that it makes more room for our whole expression of manhood, a journey that will take us across great distances and bring us face to face with a wide variety of experiences, all of which will contribute to the vivaciousness and potency of our manhood and the journey itself. When we view mature masculinity as only this or only that, we stifle and constrict the necessary expression of variability, nuance, and dynamism inherent in our humanness. We attempt to force a living, dynamic being into a rigid and narrow mold, often to their own detriment. Identifying the limits of such a fixed view does not mean that I'm suggesting we ignore very real frameworks, or roads, if you will, that are revealed to us through the mythic and the archetypal. Not at all. There is meaning to being a man, just as there is meaningful variance between men in their expressions of authentic masculinity. However, not everything is equally helpful or equally supportive. Thus, we must be discerning about what we hold on to or what we propagate within ourselves and our communities as men. Furthermore, we must also remain vigilant to the risk of rigidity, the risk of falling into a blind hegemony of masculinity that cares more for tradition and adherence than it does to uplifting this generation of men and the next generation of boys into a healthy and thriving community of brothers. So, the benefit of this reimagining is that the terrain widens and the structures are fortified. There is more room for all that it is to be a man without losing sight of what has made man unique since we first walked this earth. Carl Jung said that there are as many archetypes as there are ways to respond to the situations of life. And as far as I can see it, there are as many ways to embody these masculine archetypal energies as there are men alive today. As such, we might find it daunting to ask a question like, what kind of men does the world need today? If variance in expression is healthy, how can we say that there are ways of being a man that are more needed, healthier, or better? Simple. Some ways of being a man are harmful to the planet. They're harmful to our more than human kin, to ourselves, and to others. There are ways of being a man that bring others away from their fullest expression of themselves, and thus we can say with ease that not all expressions or actions are equally valuable. As such, how would we hope to identify those qualities that are needed, that are helpful and valuable? Well, we will look to those things that have always brought us value: truth, wisdom, justice, care, courage, beauty, honor. This is not an exhaustive list, but the virtues that draw forward our aspirations and the heart of what is good in human is where we ought to look. When we look to higher order values, virtues, and principles within the architecture of the archetype, we begin to see both sets of behaviors and qualities of intention that bring forward goodness into the world. The world needs men who seek these virtues and embody them through dedication and commitment. It helps to remember that the archetypes, although they're imagined on our movie screens and on the pages of our novels, are not actually separate from us. These very same qualities that capture our attention and inspire our imagination live within our psyche and our soul. Thus, we can look upon these characters, myths, and stories and ask and explore some of the following questions. What makes a great and noble warrior? And where do I see these qualities in myself? Where might I bring forward more of this energy into my life? What is it that makes a sage or a wise man? And what can I do with the magic of my own unique soul to make this world a better place? What does it mean to truly love as a man? How can I find greater strength and willingness in my capacity to feel and relate deeply to life? And what does it mean to be a just and caring king? How do I tend to those in my care, and how do I tend to my duties? What exactly is the highest principle that I answer to in the throne of my heart? Maybe these questions sound grandiose, too mental, or out of reach. This may be because we have lost touch with our mythic selves as a culture, and now we look upon the mythic as fantastic or false when it is more real than most of what we think. So, what kind of man does the world need today? Mythic. Mythic, matured men who are connected to their bodies, hearts, and to the earth. Men who are willing to act, to feel, to learn, and to lead. men who bear their duty with honor and their failures with humility. We need a new birthing of the spirit of our grandfathers, a remembering of ancient ways re-envisioned for today's needs. Our modern world needs mythic men. If you feel the call to step into your mythic masculinity, your own archetypal expression, and to re-empower your life and relationships from within, then it's time you and I connect. As of April 12th, 2025, the doors are opening to a new men's container called Beyond the Hero. This is a journey for men who are ready to take up the reins of their life, to move beyond the bonds of boyhood and take aim at their highest purpose. There is both a group container and one-on-one facilitation available, so if you're ready, or even if you're just curious, check the links in the description. You will see Beyond the Hero there. Click it and reach out. With all that said, let's summarize where we've been today. First, we started by identifying how different types of myths have and are shaping our current conception of masculinity. We saw the drawbacks and the deficiencies therein that are plaguing modern man. We then turned to the notion of initiation and its vital role in maturing the masculine psyche. We noted how our current Western culture fails at meaningfully initiating its boys into genuine manhood and community. From the nature of initiation, we moved to the major quaternity of masculine archetypes and saw how they can illuminate the structure needed for meaningful initiation. We saw too how an understanding of this quaternity can serve men in finding balance within themselves, and this led us to the point of reimagination, taking the nature of initiation as journey and seeing all of masculine maturation as such. We recognize the dynamic, adaptable, and living qualities of this process. We then explored the benefits that flow from accepting this process-based understanding of masculinity. The prime benefit named was that it offers greater spaciousness to the varied and valid expressions of masculinity in modern day. We then closed in on one of the biggest questions of our time. What kind of men does the world need today? I did my best to identify what qualities are needed from man and how we might go about finding them in ourselves and in our lives. And I closed with an invitation for you, dear brother, to go beyond the hero and enliven your life with your unique and mythic masculinity. And with that, we reach the end of our episode. I thank you for sharing your time with me today. And that concludes this episode of the Smiling Human podcast. Thank you so much for listening. But before you go, I have 2 invitations for you. The first invitation is to receive a free gift. I've created a free insight journal. This is a 30-day self-reflection and introspection journal that you can download at no cost in the description below. Go have a look and join the journey. The second invitation I have for you is, if it feels within your means and possible for you, then please head over to patreon.com/thesmilinghuman. Becoming a patron will give you access to perks like behind-the-scenes footage and access to live Q&As with me monthly. You also get voting privileges to help pick new guests or to help guide other episode content. Truly, the support of listeners like you, paid or unpaid, goes a long way. So if you can like, share, subscribe, and give a rating on the podcast app, all of that goes a long way. Thank you to each and every one of you who's been on this journey with me. See you again soon.